wide receiver Mike Matthews. The number 10 player in the class is fresh off a visit to Clemson. The Tigers are battling against the likes of Alabama, Georgia, USC, Tennessee, and of course a whole lot more for his services. Speaking of more, let's talk more about this with our director of recruiting. That's Steve Wiltfong. Steve, what are you hearing coming out of that visit, and what's next?
Another terrific visit for Mike and his family. I got a chance to talk to him and his mother after the trip. Mike highlighted the truly big family among the players and the coaching staff. Really enjoyed sitting down and talking with Coach Dabo Sweeney and taking in some words of wisdom from him. And he's been making the rounds lately. He's been back at Georgia, been back at Alabama, been to Auburn. Actually got a chance to go visit North Carolina and NC State recently. Going to take an official visit to USC in June. They're a major contender. But we know Clemson's way in this one. It's been one of his favorite schools since the process started. And his mom, Regina, said the coaches and staff have always shown us love. And we always see why Clemson is such a unique place. We watched the team practice, sat down with Coach Sweeney, Coach Tyler Grisham, new offensive coordinator, Coach Garrett Riley, quite a bit. Program has a long-standing history for success, she said, and development of players on and off the field. And the current players also made an impact on both Mike and his family, spending a lot of time with them. So Clemson's in the middle of this one. I expect him to take his official visits before deciding. I would imagine Clemson gets one of those. Clemson is gearing up for a big recruiting weekend, the first weekend of June. That's when they're trying to bring in all their top targets. So wouldn't be surprised if we see Mike Matthews in there that weekend if he doesn't have a conflict with AAU basketball or something else.
Steve, we talked QB dominoes on the show earlier this week, and one player we're keeping an eye on is Luke Moga, the 2024 quarterback from the state of Arizona. You broke the news that he intends to announce his college decision on April 28th. The crystal ball right now favors Oregon. Why are you leaning with the Ducks for the West Coast signal caller?
Well, I think that's a staff that he's really hit it off with. Offensive coordinator Will Stein and Dan Lanning and company. They were one of the first schools to really prioritize Luke Moga and put him near the top of their board. Oregon, they're looking for quarterbacks that can create and make things happen when they're under duress, guys that can extend plays, guys that can get chunk plays with their legs. And Luke Moga and Hoss Haney, who's committed to TCU, those are the two most dynamic guys in the class at the position, in my opinion. Luke Moga's got 10.5 speed in the 100-meter dash. He's a guy that's still developing as a passer, but we see all the traits and upside there as well. So he's a guy that Oregon covets. I think he's going to visit there later this month, and I love where the Ducks stand coming into his decision. Oregon is the nation's number 6 class right now, guys. A little bit of breaking news. They just flipped a defensive lineman from Missouri, Tioni Gray, who was committed to Missouri for a month, visited Oregon last weekend, jumped in the fold for the Ducks today. We're expecting a hot April for them. He's the third to commit this month, joining safety Aaron Flowers and offensive lineman Trent Ferguson. We like them for Moga, and I think several more could commit to Oregon before this month is out.
Wow, we love the breaking news. And if you thought this conversation was the most exciting one that you've had this week, probably not, because you recently spoke with, USC head coach Lincoln Riley. You can find that conversation online at 247sports.com. Highly recommend you do that. At the end of the show, please, Steve, give us a taste right now. What were one or maybe two big takeaways that you got from that conversation?
Well, our conversation started with their late recruiting win of Duce Robinson, landing the nation's #1 tight end in the country. And this was a class that was bookended by 2 5-stars. 2 days after Coach Riley took the job back in 2021, his quarterback followed him, 5-star quarterback Malachi Nelson. And then they end the class 16 months later with Duce Robinson. And talking to Coach Riley about that, the West Coast was a place where programs like Oklahoma, schools where Lincoln Riley, they could come out to the West and land a blue chipper or two because USC was down. Well, USC's not down anymore. They were a Pac-12 championship game win away from making the college football playoff. They've now recruited 2 straight top 5 portal classes. This recruiting class with Duce Robinson in the fold, #1 in the Pac-12, #8 nationally. This is a program on the rise. And with Lincoln Riley in the corner office, Dan Lanning even in the corner office at Oregon, it's going to be harder for programs to come out west and poach guys like Duce Robinson. USC's class has Malachi Nelson in the fold. They have the number one receiver in the country in the fold, and Zachariah Branch, who they beat Ohio State for. They flipped the offensive lineman Elijah Page from Notre Dame. They beat Georgia for two tight ends, not only Duce Robinson, but Walker Lyons. And Lincoln Riley, he prides himself on being one of the big relationship builders with their top targets, not just to land these guys, but to also build the foundation and trust with them that when they get to USC, they can coach them hard and help them get where they want to go. But they have that trust with them because they have that long-standing relationship from the recruiting process with Lincoln Riley heavily involved there. And then look, the other player that I know they love a lot of guys in this class. They love their offensive line class. They love the way that they've addressed the front seven on defense. The skill player class is as good as it gets nationally. But Tackett Curtis, speaking of that front seven class, was their number one linebacker in the country on the board. And we talked about USC and their brand and being able now to keep top players out west home. But it's also a program that can go across the country, go into Louisiana, and beat the likes of Ohio State for Tackett Curtis, who's already turning heads for them in spring practice, not only as a performer on the field, but as a guy that's eventually going to be a leader of that defense.
Steve, staying with USC, the Trojans have their spring game this weekend. Who are some big names that you're expecting to make it to the Coliseum?
Well, as USC tries to land a second straight top 10 recruiting class here, top 247 running back Taylor Tatum, our number 2 running back in the country, is one of the headliners this weekend, and he's excited to get back out to campus. He's been in great communication with Coach McDonald, of course, Coach Riley. He's looking forward to seeing the spring game in the offense, but he's just developed really strong relationships with the Trojans, and I think that they are one of the front runners in this recruitment coming into the visit. They're also hosting the number 2 running back in 2025, number 3 running back in 2025, Jordan Davison from local Mater Dei, but some other big names in the 2024 class that are expected out there this weekend. You have in-state safety Jason Mitchell from St. John Bosco. USC's already trending towards he's already trending towards USC on the crystal ball. You have the number 6 tight end in the country, a top 100 player in our rankings, Walter Matthews, coming out from the Peach State. The number 1 interior offensive lineman in the land, DeAndre Carter from Mater Dei, will be there. A couple more 4 stars, Blair. You got Marquand McCraney from Washington State Highline High School. And then you got Marquise Gallegos from in-state there, Chaminade. So USC hosting some top targets this weekend. Also Braylon Conley, a corner from Texas. Makai Sena, an offensive lineman from Texas.
Another school expecting a big turnout at their spring game this weekend is Florida. You got 5-star safety Xavier Filsame. He is expected to attend, but you actually put in a crystal ball for him to Florida yesterday. So what has you leaning Gators before he even heads to Gainesville this weekend?
Well, he's long been leaning towards Florida, in my opinion, based on the intel I have. Now, Florida's had some transition on their defensive staff, but I think he's hit it off with the new guys there and loves Coach Billy Napier, of course. And this is a Sunshine State native that's always loved the Gators. He's had terrific experiences at Florida before. Obviously, he's back for today's spring game, and I just like the way it's trending for Florida. And when you look at this Florida class that's in the top 10 right now as well, this is a program that's trying to turn around a defense that ranked number 96 nationally last year. And I love the way they're recruiting linebackers with Miles Graham and Adarius Hitman Hayes in the fold. Hitman Hayes is one of my favorite players in the country, regardless of position. And if they can add Xavier Filsame to that, that'd be a heck of an early defensive haul for Billy Napier and company. And I like the way it's trending coming into his visit this week.
2 more to discuss with the Gators, 5-star edge Colin Simmons and the nation's number 1 running back, Jarrett Gibson. What's the latest with both of them as Florida tries to make a move in their recruitments?
Yeah, in addition to trying to get Colin Simmons in for this week's spring game, they're also trying to get him back in June for a visit then when he could be joined by his mom, Monica McCarley, who's a key part of his decision process. But it's Coach Mike Peterson that's keeping the Gators alive in this recruitment as they battle so many of the nation's heavyweight programs. I know he's high on LSU, high on Texas, just had a great visit to TCU. Colorado's in the mix here, Alabama, Tennessee, or some other programs he's spoken highly of, and then certainly don't sleep on Texas A&M. for Colin Simmons as well. But Florida hanging around in there, and it's Mike Peterson leading the charge, and then Jarrett Gibson, the number one running back in the land. He's a Gainesville native. He's been several times. Was there earlier this spring. Was there earlier this week. Now back for the spring game. I think Florida trails some schools here. Texas is the crystal ball favorite. He's going to be back in Austin this weekend. And then Miami's a program that I think is on the rise for Jarrett Gibson as well. But Florida, all you can do right now is hang around in this recruitment, keep getting them to campus as many times as possible, see what the season looks like this fall. And perhaps Jarrett Gibson, who at one point was committed to Florida, it was his first offer, and he jumped on it shortly after. Maybe his recruitment comes full circle way down the road.